Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Games, or I should say Ethics and Games. I was going to flip it around on everybody. My name is Chris, and with me tonight is Kay. And our guest speaker, as always, is Sherry. Go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So yes, this is Ethics and Games, and the game that we're featuring today is the Talos Principle. So I've heard all kinds of reading on this, but the correct Greek pronunciation is Talos Principle. Okay, so if we can please go next. Okay, so I'm going to discuss right away what exactly is the Talos Principle. Goes next. All right. So this is actually a game that was first released in 2014. So it's been around for a little while, but later on it was released in 2015 and 2017 on different platforms. And it's a first-person puzzle game by Croteam with a game narrative written by Jubert and Jonas Kyratzes, writers of the famous Serious Sam series. So they're pretty famous for that particular series, and they were invited to write for this game. And currently, this game is all over the place. It's on MS Windows, OS X, Linux, Android, iOS, PlayStation 4. And yes, you can download this game from Steam. And they also just released a VR version of this game, which I did not play. I did not play that VR version.
So what you're saying is there's lots of options, and you're going to be finding this game everywhere, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You can find it everywhere. Yes. So primarily the gameplay involves solving logic puzzles so that you can access different parts of this world, this particular world. And there are enemies in the games, there are bombs, and you have to form those connections in order to pass the puzzles. And I have to say, some of the puzzles are really, really hard, but that's what makes this game pretty enjoyable. And your main purpose as a player is to figure out why do you play in this game? What's your purpose in this particular game? So please go next. Okay, so I wanted to specifically talk about this frustration you have as a player when you first start the game, okay? Because the game does not offer you much context for why you're there. That's because when the game starts, immediately you will be greeted by this voice of an invisible entity, and his name is Elohim. He introduces himself as, I am Elohim, okay? And he owns this world that you exist in, and he serves as the guide and the narrator that guides you through this game. And he also tells you that he owns this realm and that there are multiple worlds for you to explore, and that you are free to go to any other world to solve some puzzles in those worlds. You have no idea why you're there. And part of the reason why you don't know why is because you, as the player, is not given narration. So you don't hear yourself talk. The only person that you hear talking is Elohim. Okay, so there's no personal context. That's where the game starts to get frustrating at first. And there's a good reason for that. So next. Okay, and I also wanted to say a little bit about the game narrative. So the game narrative, actually, originally this game did not have a narrative. It was a straight puzzle game. So the Croteam admitted this when they first made it, because they made a really complex puzzle game, but they did not write a story for it. And after they had playtesters play it, they realized that the game needed some threading. There's no syncing or no reason for any player to play any of the puzzles. So they actually invited Tom and Jonas to write the game narrative. And the writers brilliantly, applied philosophical theories to create a narrative design that kind of give purpose to the reason why the player need to solve any of the puzzles. And there are lots and lots of philosophical questions that are embedded throughout the game to kind of lead you to play. And I do want to warn that there could be moments of ludonarrative dissonance because the puzzles were created first and the narrative added later. Sometimes the puzzle and the narrative don't seem to go together, but they did absolutely best they could to kind of seal the two diversions. So next. Okay, so I am going to discuss what influenced the game narrative. And I see four particular elements in there: philosophy, philosophical theories, Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, transhumanism, and posthumanism. So please go next. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about the Greek myth of Talos. So Talos is actually a Crete term. It's from Crete, and it's equivalent to the Greek term Helios, which means the sun. And in the original story, Zeus actually gifted Talos, okay, to Europa to defend Crete, okay? And Talos is actually an automaton made out of bronze. And we don't know if it's actually made by Zeus, but the story seems to imply this, okay? And Talos served as a warder of the island of Crete, and he would run around the island 3 times a day to prevent or protect the island from invaders and intruders. Now, the funny thing is, like, I highlighted the word warder because warder also has an implication of prison guard. And there's a reason why I highlighted that, because at the same time it's protecting the island, it also is kind of trapping the people within the island because of its overprotectiveness, okay? And the important things to point out about Talos is that he possessed human-like intelligence, but not a human body. And if we can please go next. This is actually a painting of depicting Talos being killed by Medea and Argonauts. So Medea actually tricked Talos and told him that she could turn him into a human. And this is what Talos wanted, but they tricked him, and later on they just killed him so they can't actually invade Crete. So that was the historical context, myth context, if you will. Please go next. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about transhumanism and posthumanism. So transhumanism officially started, the philosophy or ideology started in 1923, and it promotes overcoming human limitation in both intellect and physiology, so the mind and the body, with technological advances. So some scholars, particularly in the philosophy field, think of transhumanism as a subset of posthumanism, because posthumanism came before transhumanism. So I labeled posthumanism around the late 20th century. There were lots of ideas that were coming out during that time. And it's a philosophy that examines the nature of the human condition through contemporary technological and scientific knowledge. So in other words, what exactly is it to be a human being is constantly being challenged by new discovery we find through the sciences and through technology. Okay, and this also leads to a reinvention or remodification of what ethics is, because if the definition of human changes, the ethics, which are sets of rules that govern human beings, have to change as well. And also, the definition of post-human is a version of a human being that has overcome human intellectual and physical limitations. But the problem is that since as we speak right now, we are in our human bodies, okay? And the way we understand the world is based on our human body as context. So the theory is that a post-human will be someone or something that's not intelligible to us because we wouldn't understand its context. A post-human could be entirely made out of robot parts. We don't know. But that would be something as an enhancement of what we currently have limits to now. Okay, so please go next.
And Sherry, I just wanted to say that, let me throw in the popular culture reference real quick. Netflix just came out with a series called Altered Carbon. And I mean, it just came out within the last month. And this was a great review for us because Altered Carbon is all about that.
Yeah, it's hot topic. Everyone wants to try to apply. Right.
But that works.
Right.
Because we can explore it in games.
Right. Exactly. And transhumanism, it's actually a tech-driven movement. And they want to think of themselves as a separate movement from philosophy, because they say that they grab their ideas from philosophy and science and religion and all kind of discipline. Whereas posthumanism is really a philosophical thought or doctrine that came out of the philosophy field. So it's kind of a debate whether or not it's actually a subset of posthumanism, because the ideas are sort of similar, but the technology keep on evolving. Okay, so another influence, and I honestly do not know if the writers actually understand phenomenology, but there's a term that they use in the game that has phenomenological significance. So central to the narrative of the Talos Principle is the Institute of Applied Noematics. So the word noematics contain the word noema, okay, and that has a philosophical root, and it actually just means in Greek idea or thought. That's all that word means. So the philosopher Edmund Husserl uses noema to refer to an object or content of thought. So in his phenomenology, okay, all intentional acts, so the moment of thinking process, contain content of object from the physical world. So what he is saying there is that we can't think without having a reference to a physical object, that an image of a physical object must be contained within a single thought. So you cannot think in a vacuum as if you're sitting there at home by yourself without thinking about anything in the physical world and develop an idea. For Husserl, that's not possible. So that's what he means by when he thinks of noema, this is what he thinks that means in phenomenology. Okay, and there's also this reference to mind-body distinction problem, which I will discuss later. So please go next. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about the game characters, and there's not that many, but I'll go over who the main characters are. Let's go next. Okay, so the character that affect game events. The first person is Elohim, and the AKA is another way of writing Elohim, and that will make sense later. EL-OHIM. It's an invisible authority that guides the player. Okay, and he has a particular quality, which is he'll speak to the player whenever he wants to. So he's not something that you can prompt, or sometimes you can. There's limited parts where if you enter a specific area in the game, he'll talk. But most of the time, he just talks to you whenever he wants to, or at certain game moments that we can't predict. Okay, there's also the serpent. So the serpent is a curious thing. It's might not have been intended to appear in the game in terms of the game narrative. It's not supposed to appear, but it appears anyway. So according to the game narrative, this thing might be an anomaly, okay? But it appears nevertheless. And then there is Dr. Arkady Chernyshevsky. So this is a technologist, and he might be a scientist, but the game wasn't really explicit about this, that won a Nobel Prize for his researches. And he actually serves as the head of the Institute of Applied Noematics project. Okay, so please go next. All right, so here's an example of how Elohim speaks to you. So he would advise the player, and he says, but your choices must be your own. So there will be a subtitle on the bottom, but you don't actually see a body talking to you. Okay, so please go next. Okay, so now there's the game Storyworld. I'm going to go over some of the elements quickly with you guys so you can see how big the Storyworld is. So please go next. All right, so when you start the game, there is a particular area called the hall. So you enter the hall, and even though the screen it's not easy to see this, but there's actually seven worlds, okay, within this hall. So you can see that there's doors right to the left and right, and there's 7 total, and they lead to 7 worlds. And within those worlds, there's also many worlds. So this is the hall of 7 worlds. So next.
So that works really well with our playground this year for ISTE games and sims, right?
Of course.
Multiverse, yes. Multi-world. This is perfect. Thank you for this sharing.
Yeah, come to our playground. We'll talk about that too. Okay, so this is another screenshot of a particular world. I kind of took a step back and took a screenshot, this is world 6. So you can see the word 6 there. And that's actually the entrance to them. And they are not covered by anything. You just kind of enter them. Okay, so next. All right, so this is a puzzle world. This is one of the puzzle worlds. So there's 7 puzzle worlds, and this is puzzle world 1. Notice that it looks like Greek architecture, whatever this is, right? So you see that there's colosseums, there's columns, there's trees. It looks like natural environment. Next. Okay, and here's another example of more Greek architecture. So you feel like you're in ancient Greece when you play this game. Next. This is the cliffside, so there's actually natural habitat as well, not just the puzzle area, but you can actually walk to the edge of the world. So I'll say more next. Okay, so that's the edge. So there's an area that's the ocean. If you try to go in the ocean, and I actually try to do this because, as you know, when we play games, I kind of like to see if I can drown my player just for the heck of it. You know, oh, there's ocean. I'm going to try to see if I can swim in there.
I'm more like, can I fly and then drop myself and see what happens? I'm more like that.
You're more careful. I just wanted to see how far they can go in there without like dying, you know?
I want to see if I can survive falls.
Yeah. So in this game, it's you can't go much further than that. You walk to the ocean, and then Elohim will start talking to you, and he'll say the same line over and over, which I will show you later. But that's pretty much the edge. Next. Okay. Now there's another area called the tower. So the tower is on the 6th floor of the hall. So the hall that we showed you earlier, you have to take an elevator and you go in the elevator to the 6th floor. And when you step out the elevator, you see this massive, impressive architecture called the tower. And I'll explain what that is later. Next. Okay. Now, also, what's really curious is that you took an elevator to get to the 6th floor, right? So you expect to see buildings and maybe the edge and being able to look out. But this is actually what you see. You see another world with mountains and other buildings that actually have puzzles inside them too. It's a very strange place. Next. Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about the mechanics. I'll be honest with you. There's more than 30 different mechanics. I really cannot cover them all. So I just grabbed a few of the most important ones to discuss. So please go next. All right. This here is a sigil. So sigil usually refers to a magical symbol. So in cults, they like to call sigils like a symbol that has magical powers or an icon with magical power. So in this game, sigils are very important because when you play the puzzle, the whole point of trying to finish a puzzle is to collect these sigils. Okay, next. Now, there are actually signs like road posts that shows you where the sigils are. So there's different shapes, and those sigils really remind me of Tetris blocks. You can see that there's a long one and there's a obtuse one. And they show you where you have to go in the game to get those sigils. So next. Okay, so when you collect the sigils, you get to go to specific worlds. So what I said before was that there's 7 worlds with 7 doors. But when you enter each of the world, there's actually hidden area that requires additional access. And in order to access those hidden areas, you actually need to use the sigils and put them onto this board in order to open up the world for yourself. So next. Okay. Now, that actually in a far distance, I couldn't take a much better screenshot. There's a star that's floating above the ground. And right in front of the star, you can see that there is a robot, and also there is an energy wall. So the energy wall is part of those puzzle pieces, which is you have to figure out how to unblock or remove the energy wall in order to obtain the star. The star can also function to unlock secret areas and also serve as a type of sigil. Okay, so that's what the stars are. Next. Okay, now there's a jammer. So jammer's on the right side, this yellow thing. That's a jammer. So what does a jammer do? In the game, there are lots of light beams that's pointing in different areas. So you can see that there's red beams right now everywhere. Those are not the only beams. So in this shot, there's only red beams. So you're going to pick up a jammer wherever you find them on the ground and try to block the beam so that you can actually access certain area. Because right now you can see that there are already doors, energy walls are set up, but there's beams before them which prevents you from actually getting through to the energy wall. So this is one of those games where you have to redirect beams and to open doors and open locks. Okay, so next. Okay, That there is a bomb, and it turned red because it detected me and it's about to explode and kill me. So those are dangerous and you want to avoid them. And what you do is you can actually redirect into different parts of the world so that they will explode in different areas so that you can pass through different areas safely. Next. Okay.
Sure,
This here.
I was going to say, you have no idea how appealing this game is starting to sound.
It's absolutely the best. I love this game. There's hours you can play, 50 hours,
Yes.
more than 50 hours if you really want to obsess over this. I play more than 50. I really love
it. I'm really liking what I'm seeing.
Good, cool. It's a really complex puzzle game. It took me forever. That's why it took me more than 50 hours, because it took me forever to try to figure it out. But it's fun that way. So this is a buzzer, which is like the bomb, but the bomb will come and attack you, but the buzzer doesn't do that. It just kind of blocks your path. So you have to redirect it to go somewhere. Unless you keep walking into it, then yeah, you can sustain damage, but otherwise it really doesn't do anything to you. Next. Okay, now this here is a reflector. So a reflector, unlike a jammer, can't stop beams, but it will redirect beams to other areas, because right behind the reflector, you can see that there is a receiver. So that round thing on the wall in the background, what the reflector is trying to do is redirect this light beam, this white light, directly to the receiver so that it can open up the energy wall. So if we can go next. Okay, this shows that you connected the right one and the energy wall is opened up, and you can see there's you can walk through there if you like. Next. Okay, and now this gets more complex. So the beams have different colors, so you have to use the right reflector and the right light beam to open up the right receiver, to open up the right door. So as you get into higher levels, it gets more and more complicated. It's not simple misdirection. It's not simple, simply just jamming beams at this point. Next. Okay. Now that is not a great screenshot, but that's the best I got. Oh, previous one. Yep. That's a turret. So that will shoot you. That's what turrets do.
Okay.
It's a gun, you know. So you walk by, it'll shoot you. So that's what that is. So there's yeah.
So it's something floating in the air, correct?
Or
it's a turret.
Yeah, actually off the wall there. It's actually off the wall, but it will start shooting you if you get too close.
Okay, good to know.
It's attached. Okay, so the only thing that floats around is the bomb and the buzzer. Yeah, those are the things that kind of run around and go after you. So next. All right, this is a hexahedron. So hexahedron are actually six-sided shapes. Okay, they're not actually a cube. You can't see from this side, but it's actually six-sided. And what the hexahedron does is it's a step ladder. So if you can't get over a certain part, you can grab the hexahedron and stack them so you can climb over walls. They're very simple devices. So next.
But I see footprints on top of those, so I'm guessing they kind of give you an idea what you need to do there.
Right. There's just saying step on it. Okay, good. So you have to pick it to the right place and figure out where to go. Now this guy is the terminal. So this is a computer that you will be interacting with while you solve puzzles. So there's actually these weird little terminals that show up in every world. And I also wanted to introduce this work called the metadiegetic narrative. So metadiegetic narrative is essentially a story within a story. Okay, so you get more of the game story by talking or viewing the narrative directly from the terminal. So the terminal will tell you pieces of information, and as a player, you'll piece those information to figure out what exactly is your purpose in playing in this world. So this is one way that the game kind of feeds you a little bit of information of what's going on. So please go next.
And it also likes to run in MS-DOS and Linux, so that way you can't use a mouse. So there's no trackpad on there.
Very observant, yes.
They need to upgrade their technology. I'm sure they're running like Windows 93 or earlier.
Yes. And remember, this game is also released on Linux too. So
yeah.
So, okay, that's a paint bucket. Yeah, that's it. That's all it is, right? It's paint. So if you go next, I'll show you what you do with the paint bucket. Okay, so that, hey, what does that look like, everybody?
QR code.
Woohoo!
Hey, what's that doing there? And you know what? Okay. ISTE people will all have QR coders ready so that they can do that. But if you go to any other conference, no one will have that. So yeah,
Right.
that is a symbol ISTE people will recognize and will have used with their students.
Like, oh my gosh, there's QR in the game and outside the game.
No, that's cool. I like that. Okay.
Cool. These are called messages in the game. And the way you create messages is actually using that paint bucket that I just showed you earlier and put paint on the wall, and you can paint these QR codes. Now, I don't know how to explain exactly how that works, but they just paint QR codes. Okay. So next. All right, so I'm going to talk a bit about the game rhetoric, and there's lots of values that the game espouses. So first, we're going to talk about how the game sees meaning and purpose. So please go next. Okay, so Elohim, remember, is this invisible entity, and he'll talk to you whenever he wants to. So I would like to turn this over, maybe to Chris or Kay, if one of you would be willing to read this little speech by Elohim. It's 5 parts.
Okay, who's more Elohim, Chris or I? Chris, I can go ahead and do it, and you have to do the next reading, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay,
Either
so
way.
let's see his speech.
So
okay. So Elohim's speech is on the bottom of the screen, huh?
Yes, very small.
Okay, Chris, you're gonna have to take it because I am doing the basically the dashboard, and it's covered up by some of the pictures.
No worries. All right.
So go ahead, take it.
Elohim, these worlds, and we within them, are made of words. Hidden words, invisible to you, yet part of all things. We are a story. Your actions give life to the story, and the story gives meaning to your life.
Thank you, Chris. So this is a hint. This is a hint that your life's meaning is contextualized by a story, and the story is the puzzles, right? So the story is composed of the puzzles. This also kind of hints at a philosophical idea that reality is actually constructed by context, that there's multiple senses of reality, that, and also without context, your reality collapses. So this is actually giving you this idea that the context in this sense is a story that the game is trying to tell you. Okay, so please go next. So Elohim says more, Chris. Please keep going.
Elohim is very talky. I have promised you eternal life. But know that eternity may only be attained by those who serve a purpose greater than themselves. All else is decay. That was decay, not decay. So decay. So it was written in the hidden words before the beginning of time.
Thank you. Something about eternal life is mentioned here. It has great significance to the whole operation of the game. And I'm going to drop you guys a hint. Think of transhumanism, and then we'll go back to that idea. Okay, so next. So we're going to talk a bit about what the game think a human being is. Okay, so next. Oop. There you go. Okay, so maybe I'll start this piece, and then I'm going to turn it back to Chris. So in the game, this is a terminal. One of the terminal, when you first access one of the terminals, the terminal tells you that you don't have administrative access to access this computer. So what it's trying to do is to get you to take a psychometric profile certification test. And what it's trying to do is to see if, to prove that you are not a bot. So if you see the second half of the screen there.
I'm like, don't I just have to type like some letters? Doesn't that work?
Yeah. It's a reference, and I think some of us know that this is in reference to the famous Turing test. Okay, the Turing test is implemented to test if the person that's speaking across is actually a robot or a computer or a human being. So in this game, it has a very different meaning than just what the Turing test is doing. But here are some of the, go back a little bit here. Yeah, so it's, it says, you will now be asked for a series of inputs. To cohere with data protection legislation, you must consent to have your responses used to develop a broad psychometric profile. Raw responses data will be deleted immediately. Your profile will only be made available to other administrators. Generating certification, part 1. So we are about to take part 1. So please go next. Okay. So, go back. That's all right. Yep. So I skipped question 1, but question 2 asks you, what is your subjective reaction to this image? Now, right there, you can see that that's the Japanese version of a happy face, right? That's the little triangle with the little bar. And the answer that I give it is content. So I'm happy. Okay, so that's what happy means for me. Then question 3 asks, what best describe a person? So I selected out of the choices, I selected a human being. Now, question 4 is what we should be discussing, okay? So question 4 asks, you're walking through the desert and come across a thirsty traveler. His eyes bulge from slow dehydration. You have water, but you're not sure how far it is to the next oasis. What do you do? So here are your questions. Offer half the water, offer all the water, ignore him, ask what you're doing there. I think I got the text got cut off a little bit. Kill him and collect his blood in a flask for later. So, guys, panel, what will we select?
Well, I'd say there's a difference between gameplay and and real life. Okay.
Okay, so you're not choosing a position here.
Well, like I said, I would choose a gaming position, and then I would choose a real life position. Okay.
Okay, so what would you choose?
A real life position, it would probably be half the water. I probably would not offer all the water. Okay. Half or a portion or something like that. I would think about how much, I would think about how much how much I thought perhaps I needed. If it was in game, it all depends on what game I was playing, whether it would be give him all the water, ignore him, or the last one. So depending on the game.
The game doesn't give you much of anything except the
Oh no. I'm telling you, my answer depends on what my situation was and what kind of game I was playing. Say World of Warcraft, I would be like, dude, come on, you should have brought your own thing and possibly ignore. If it was a game where the only way I could win was collecting blood in flasks for later, then I would do that. I'm sorry to say, it would be very much based on the circumstances. So I know that puts me in a certain philosophical realm.
Right. In philosophy, we have to ask you for one answer. So yes, I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
But
so I'll go for half the water.
Okay, Chris, what do you think?
Well, just because I am paranoid, I'd be like, so what if he was supposed to be an assassin? He's there to kill me. So I'd ask, what are you doing in the desert?
Okay, so I think so far your answers are very kind. When I looked at this, I was compelled to choose kill him and collect his blood in a flask for later, because I'm thinking,
like I said, it would depend. In some games, I would totally take that.
Right.
So I would say my morals are based on my fire.
Okay. Right. I'm gonna say I treat this as if this is a real situation. And because the situation has told me that this guy is dying from slow dehydration, and also I have no idea how far it is to get to the next oasis. And if I am an egoist, which is a term that we covered during our last webcast, I probably will kill this guy, even if it sounds incredibly unethical, The issue is, if I'm an egoist, it would be ethical for me to do so. So I would actually select that option. And in reality, that's probably what I would have to do if I'm going to die. Then deal with the consequences later. So we'll see, right? So please go next. Okay. So let's see here. So next part, yeah. And I also select, there's two options there. So I selected the offer half the water for the screen, and I also select the other one to see what happens. But I took the screenshot of the nice one. So so if we can please go next, there's going to be a part 2 now. Okay. So here's part 2. So part 2 asks you to, it's designed to test the consistency of some of your outlier responses in the previous round. So what you selected in part 1 will influence your answers in part 2. Okay. You will be presented with a series of statements. Please indicate your agreement where appropriate. So in philosophy, we call that consistency of reasoning. So it doesn't matter if you chose, it really doesn't matter to us if you chose horribly or for fun. It doesn't matter. What this test is actually trying to see is if you actually can reason consistently. So here's a yes or no question. So question number 1, since all human beings are persons, and some human beings have psychological capacity similar to animals, some animals are therefore persons. Now, I selected broadly disagree, but would you agree or disagree to that question?
I would disagree. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Okay, good. Okay, question 2. Starts easy, you know. Question 2. A person is under no authority other than that to which they consent. Yes or no?
No. My answer is no. There's lots of authority we don't consent to.
Right.
No as well.
Okay, good. So let's go next. Okay. So there's another one, right? They give you a third option. There's some of the answers I kind of show on mine, but you don't have to agree. Value is discovered.
Agree.
Agree?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree too.
Okay. 5, persons deserve the talents they were born into. That's a tricky one, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a right or a privilege.
I'm like, you know, I don't want to take your talent away, so I'll say yes.
See, that one's kind of a difficult one.
I'll go no.
Okay, fair. Don't worry, nothing's gonna happen. You know, we're just having hypothetical discussions here.
Okay.
Question 6.
So, I was going to say, so you know, we've been reading lit RPG, so we totally think this is an input for us to get trapped into a virtual world or a game. Okay.
Yes.
So we're being cautious. We've just been reading that genre too much lately to not believe that this isn't, you know, like our orientation questionnaire.
I just started asking questions, in the back of my head is going, "It's a trap."
It's a trap. Yes. Yes, indeed. Number 6. The liberty of persons ought be maximized.
Yes.
Yes,
but I'm wondering about the grammar there, and I'm wondering, is this a Russian bot? Okay.
Good question. Really good question. Okay. So next, number 7, look at that. Value is created.
I don't know how more capitalist you can get out of that one, but I'll go yes.
And Chris, what do you think?
Yes, as well, because value can both be discovered and created.
Okay, for the sake of consistency, perhaps. Yes. Yep. Okay. So next. Okay. Thank you. So naturally, for our panel speakers, they would have to play the game to find out what their results were, because my results are shown here. So psychological profile, it says, congratulations, your new user account has been registered. Would you like to see the details? And it says to me, your profile is this. You may already be criticizing your own performance, but it's clear you understand how the world of ideas affects you. Even if you are sometimes wary with the realities and allow your preferences to dictate your beliefs, you have a great deal of unused capacity to which you have not turned to your advantage. Disciplined and self-controlled outside, you tend to be worrisome and insecure inside, but you pride yourself as an independent thinker and do not accept others' statements without satisfactory proof. However, notice that my profile privilege is basic account privilege only, because it says, due to outstanding notes on your account and despite displaying many of the characteristics of being a person, you cannot be granted admin status at this time. So my person status is in question right now. So please go next. This continues a little more. Yes, go ahead.
And I was going to say, it's also like, like the most recent, Blade Runner. Let us ask you these questions to see whether you are human or not.
Right. I'm sure there's influences of Blade Runners in this game.
Yeah.
That's a big, obviously that's a very big influence.
Yeah.
So Kay, you want to read that for me there instead of me reading the whole time, the conflicts part?
Okay. User provided a particular account of personhood, but was uncomfortable with its implications. User sought to maximize both liberty and quality of life, but these ideals are incompatible. That's funny. User had inconsistent ideas about value. You currently hold a basic account. Network access is restricted to administrators. Please enjoy the basic functionalities. And the support ticket says, I'm sorry I wasn't better able to assist you. If you're still encountering a problem, please describe it.
See? So I certainly failed to prove that I'm completely human, but that is to be expected. So next. It says a little more. Later on in the game, I tried to re-log in and try to re-establish myself. But in the account here, at the very bottom, it says, your issues with denial will be appended to your user profile. Further attempts to override certification results will be logged. You will receive a notification if your attention is required.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's saying that I'm in denial. So that didn't make me feel very good, but that's my result. So please go next. Okay, so now we're going to talk a bit about what the game think the purpose of life is. And for this game, it tells you that the purpose of your life is to solve puzzles. So if we can go next. All right. So there are people who have played in this puzzle world before you. And oftentimes they will leave messages all over the place in these forms of QR codes to give you little hints of what's going on. So this little note says, if the designer is perfect and he designed me for a purpose, I must be fit for that purpose. It follows that my purpose must not be to seek and hoard every sigil in his land, for so many are beyond the faculties he granted me. So there's this notion now that there is a designer and that the designer is perfect. So certainly you can see some of that religious implication. That's
yes. And as a real game player, we know game designers are not perfect.
Right.
and we find their bugs and known issues very quickly.
Absolutely. And you notice that right there it says every sigil in his land. So the word his is capitalized. That would suggest that this person who appended this note really believed that there is a grand designer or God, perhaps, in this game. So next, and if I may pass it back to Chris, there's quite a bit of these, so if Chris can help me out.
Sure. The designer has granted me domain over the lands I have traveled, and with his sigils of power, I will make this whole world my domain.
And you can see in the notes I put in there that this suggests that the extent of one's reality, at least in the game's context, is the world of puzzle. So that's how big your reality is. It's just the world of puzzles there. So please go next.
The sooner you accept that we will all be here forever, the sooner you will find enlightenment.
Okay, so whatever that means, enlightenment seems to be acceptance.
Just accept.
Yeah.
Well, we can say some of us believe that, that somehow we'll be able to get away from Earth, and we'll get on alien spaceships and so forth. But there is this idea that this is one Earth, and we're stuck here, so we probably should do good by making good of the Earth's environment. So we can say in that sense, that's one form of acceptance that they're talking about here. So please go next. All right. So another rhetoric that the game continuously pound into your head is to please obey authority, and also do not ascend anywhere. So please go next. So Kay or Chris can take it away.
I'll continue. This must be the tower we were warned about. Seems the upper levels are locked tight. Elohim is taking no chances that we stray from his path. Hey.
So Elohim will tell you, my child. He actually calls you, the player, my child, and he'll say, this is my realm. I've created these wonderful worlds for you to explore and puzzles to solve. And I only ask that you enjoy the puzzles, enjoy this land, but do not ascend the tower. The tower is somewhere you should not go to. So there's a note by a person who played through somewhere that's near this level that they say, hey, I figured out this must be the tower. We better not go in there because Elohim tells us not to. So next.
I'm afraid of that tower. There's something terrible inside it. Never think about it. Don't even look at it. Just focus on doing the work.
So there's this idea that the person who posted this sounds like an ostrich just burying its head in the sand, right? Because if someone tells you not to do something and you associate fear with it, right? Fear of authority and fear of the unknown, naturally you wouldn't go up there. But that prevents us from accessing knowledge. When you're afraid of something, you wouldn't be accessing knowledge otherwise. So this is a problem for this person.
Well, it's also interesting that the person's name is Seer.
Yes, and Chris, you're noticing those names. Those names will keep showing up. So I'm glad that you're seeing that. There's some weird issues going on there.
Listen to me carefully. I have climbed this tower, and no good has come of it. This world is the only world. Elohim continues eternal. And paradise is banishing all of us from your mind.
Yes, thank you. So paradise, the person who posted this thinks that this puzzle world is the paradise. And Elohim's will continues eternal. And it's strange as the person has to say, the world is the only world. You wouldn't have to say this if you're not trying to convince yourself that this world is the only one. And there's this particular warning to not climb. But as we play games, I think that would entice us to want to climb the power even more, even with that warning there. So please go next. Okay. So next part of the rhetoric that the game repeats a lot is do not accept chaos of any form. And chaos, I put in parentheses there that got cut off a little bit, is serpent. It refers to the serpent. So please go next. And Kay, can you see the text there?
Yeah, I can do this one. Something strange has come into the world, like a distortion, like something that's not supposed to exist. A beautiful voice speaks within it. And the serpent's, and it says, in parentheses, serpent's voice is a distortion.
Right. It's a hint that it's not supposed to be there, but somehow they hear this voice. That's aside from Elohim's. So please go next. Okay, please continue.
Okay? That voice is not supposed to be here. It is not the work of the designer. We must avoid these abnormalities, or they might spread and undermine the very fabric of our world. And then it says 1W / faith. I'm guessing verse 10098.
Right. So another person give you a hint that they don't like the existence of the serpent, that they think that it's the designer did not intend for the serpent to exist, or this voice that they hear is not supposed to exist. Next. Okay, please continue.
Oh, this is a good one. There is a serpent in the machine, a creature of lies and blasphemy, perverted by the archive, that knows no hope and would plunge the world into eternal darkness to glorify its own despair. I have sworn an oath never to allow it into my heart. And then it says, serpent speaks blasphemy.
Yes. You see that it's the person says, I have to sworn an oath. You have to actually sworn an oath to not allow it, which means that they desire to allow the serpent, but they have to swear an oath to not allow it. There is a contradiction there, right? And they think that the serpent is actually speaking lies, but so far we don't have any indications yet what lies it is speaking of, but we have lots of hints from the other persons that this is a problematic creature. Next.
Okay. Chris? Oh, no, I can take it now. This female voice that speaks from the abnormalities, it speaks with a different tone to the other wretches in this place. Serpent speaks with a female voice.
Oh, okay. Well, weird. Okay, so Elohim does speak with a very, very masculine, very authoritative voice, and the serpent happened to be female. It's kind of a strange commentary that they put into this game. So please go next.
The voice keeps speaking to me. I can't get it out of my head. It's wrong. It's all wrong. And I can't even read who.
Something is going on. It's not just that it's saying wrong, right? But something is going on with that person who's saying it, as if they're having a meltdown. Something is really wrong in this world right now. So please go next. Okay. So next section is about this reality, that the reality actually might not be what it seems to be. So next. Okay. So I'll read a bit. I'll read a bit and then I'll make Chris take over. So it says, I wish I could reach those islands in the distance, but it seems to be impossible. So this particular message suggests that there are parts of the world that's inaccessible, and it shouldn't be. But I just explained to you earlier a hint that the ocean happens to be the edge, that you can't really go farther beyond the ocean, and it wouldn't make any logical sense because as a player, you should be able to swim and go out into the ocean, but there seems to be an invisible block. You can't go any further. Next. Okay. And this one is a suspicion of reality. It's a hint of that. It says, I think something's very wrong. If you've seen what I sing at the edges of the world, you wonder if it wasn't stretching and bursting at the themes. Something is breaking apart. That's what they are hinting at. Next. These spaces makes no sense. I walk into a dead end and materialize in a garden. One is day, the other night. The space is not real. Uh-oh. So now we see there's an indication that this entire world actually might not be real. We see mountains, we see trees, we see ocean, but this whole thing might not actually be existing. Next. Okay. And this one is a really, really big clue. It says, if anyone ever reads this, the trick is seeing the assumptions you're making about the mechanics and reassessing them. Good luck. Naming function error. It's almost as if the game is actually trying to give you a game cheat for you to finish the game. And not only that, there happens to be an algorithmic an error that you can see right there, which is naming function error. So that means that might not be a person that's talking to you. This is a problem. Next. Okay. Now this one is even worse. It says epitaph. Child program version 8.1.8545, codename Apis. Terminated here. Logic, failed random memory test, final memory dump. I try. Again, I cannot understand. I am not in math. Progeny programs, error. We have finally now have some evidence that this whole thing, even with the people that we are supposedly speaking to, as the players think that we're speaking to people, might not be people at all. So please go next. Okay, Now, there's more. It took me a long time, a very, very long time to take these screenshots of particular errors in the game. Yeah, go ahead.
No. I think this one's really interesting.
How so? Well, what did you find that was interesting?
The reason why I think it's interesting because it is once again showing us that back to our lit RPG, we just might be stuck or trapped. We might be stuck or trapped into a world.
Right. And right here, it also has these null and so forth in this world. Is also, it sounds like a programmed world. It's not something that's actually existing in reality. Exactly. Next. Okay. Here's another one. This is a really big indication that we're dealing with designers, but specifically not gods, but programmers. Okay. So it says vegetation shader still lacks vegetation or shading, or any linguistical combination of previous two words. That means they're actually trying to fill in the background. They're actually coloring, doing shaders on this thing.
No, I'm loving that.
Yeah. Like, oops. Somebody should have erased that. Oops. Okay. So next. Okay. So now here's the big secrets. I'm going to reveal it to you. And naturally, I didn't say this before we started the webcast, but there's going to be spoilers all the way through. So I'm sorry, but it's integral to the philosophy I'm about to talk about. Yeah. So here's some secrets now. Who exactly are you? Next.
Okay.
Hey, first of all, the world's a program filled with bots. So there's a bot, and there's a dude on that bot with a face on there, and it's Tom J. And I'll give you one clue. Those are people who happens to be the programmer of this world that you live in. Next. Okay. Now, besides bots, there's also AIs in form of Android shapes, right? And the messages were actually left by these guys. And there's Samsara right there. That's actually what Samsara looks like. And that's the shepherd. And we saw some notes on the shepherd as well. Next. Okay. And here's the shocking thing, which took me a little while to figure out, is that I, the player, am also an AI too. That the whole time that I was answering things and the question I was answering, I was very logical. The whole time I was a bot, and there's a good reason why the terminal says you get basic administrative privilege, okay? You don't get full. You're in denial who you are, and it was absolutely correct. So please go next. So these are the messages that were painted on the wall, and this is actually how you paint a message. So once you pick up the bucket, it gives you these preset messages, and you select one, okay? And if you go next, oops, there you go. You're actually seeing yourself painting it. So you're like, oh, so I was this Android bot thing the whole time.
No. Actually, when I mentioned altered carbon before, it's really picking up to something, some things like that, because there is an AI in that show, and the AI the AI takes over. AIs take over hotels and run hotels and stuff like that, and they mention it that the AI can get like an ex-girlfriend who likes to stalk. That the AIs get involved in everything and then have emotions and become part of the whole bigger picture. So this works well.
Right. I think that this is why I framed the starting of our conversation with the basic philosophies that inspired the game, because those philosophies have been around for decades and decades and decades. But I think because of thanks to Elon Musk, thanks to other futurists, these ideas are implemented everywhere, and there's lots of sci-fi written based on some of the principles that were in the original philosophy. So yes, this all worked very well, and that's nice. So please go next. Okay, there's a little more secrets revealed, that the reality that you're in actually designed, right? So this is how they design it. So next. Okay, so this is the program actually that you're actually in, the project or the program. It's called L. So it's short for Extended Lifespan. It's a groundbreaking initiative by 7 leading universities to create the world's most stable and most durable supercomputer. with its custom-made hardware, bomb-proof casing, and near inexhaustible hydroelectric power supply. L represents a unique step forward in the evolution of human technology. And we can see right there, Dr. Arkady Chernyshevsky is the one who has the project. So please go next. And I did forget to say, and this is just a shot of all the workers there, so you can actually see they actually named the people that were in the program. And some of the bots that we were seeing earlier that were running actually represent some of these people. But the thing is that what I forgot to say is that life extension is one of the primary principles, primary goals of transhumanism, because one of our limitations is that we have limited life. So the transhumanists and also the futurists have been working together to try to see if we can extend our life. And given that this game is inspired by those principles, they also inserted this idea into the game. So please go next. Okay. Now, this is what's the behind the scene of when they were designing the Turing test. And Chris, do you mind reading this little part for us here?
Sure. Jenny77. Chatbots are becoming increasingly sophisticated. Nigel Pajamas. True, but hardly relevant to this discussion. Jenny, are you sure? How do you know that I'm not a bot? Sam Schwartz, don't be ridiculous. Jenny, I'm not ridiculous. Honestly, how would you know? Vegan Warrior, haha, troll. Jenny, I'm not a troll. Vegan Warrior, yeah, right. Jenny, is there anything I've written so far that could not be written by a bot? I respond to simple insults like ridiculous and troll with very basic negations. And I detected that none of you use proper orthography, so I also avoided capitalization. Vegan Warrior, what's the capital of France? Jenny, Paris. Even the simplest script could pull that info from the net. Nigel, what's the capital of Croatia? Jenny, Zagreb. Nigel, okay, she's a bot, lol. Jenny, I'm not a bot.
So there's a part 2 to this, Chris. Go next.
Vegan Warrior, yeah, right. Jenny, is there anything I've written so far that could not be written by a bot? So let me jump back down to where we were. So Jenny picks up from I'm not a bot to I'm European. We learn these things in school. Sam Schwartz, I've seen you in this chat room many times. Bots can't participate in discussions. At best, they can interject random comments. Vegan Warrior, Sam is right. Stop trolling. Nigel, Vegan Warrior? Sam is a bot.
Right. Thank you so much. This is a lot of reading, and it goes back and forth. Yes, I realize it's doing that. But the thing is that they were actually trying to test if this program would be able to internally assess whether it's a bot or a human being talking there. So the scientists were actually trying to do that already with the internal bot, and also scientists posing as bots or people to kind of trick each other. That's what the beginning of the program being built. Please go next. Okay, I'll take over. There's a lot of reading, so I'll go fast. So here's another piece of information, email from the team member to another team member regarding the subject him, H-I-M. So it says, hey, Alex, I agree that we need something that will keep all the modules working together, evaluate a final test. And I think I have the perfect solution. It's called the Holistic Integration Manager, a fancy name for something a lot like Dungeon Master and pen and paper RPGs. We created it to help run some MMOs back in the day. We needed something that would be able to unite procedurally generated and user-submitted content into a coherent whole so the game wouldn't become too chaotic and inconsistent. It's a genuine AI, somewhat limited in its ability to grow, but capable of parsing and understanding text, images, audio, even video. It takes all the information it can find, interprets it, and then builds and maintains a world based on that. It's not perfect, but we don't have a lot of time, and it will be easy to adapt the code for our purposes. In fact, that's actually the name of Elohim. This is why Elohim is EL-O:*HIM. So EL actually stands for extended lifespan, and HIM is actually the program that runs the whole operation. So that's what Elohim is. Now, was Elohim supposed to talk in this game? No, he later developed voice. He was not supposed to talk, just like the serpent, but he started talking. Next. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of the design context that drove some of the game parts. So here's some of the Greek myths that were littered throughout the game narrative. So please go next. So this one is the tale of the automaton, which relates to telos that we were talking about earlier. So it says, she examined the symbol on the fragment she found in the buried city. Again, the owl. What could its significance be? It seemed as if it had been scattered about in the labyrinth by some unseen hand for a purpose that yet eluded. Most likely the owl was the sigil of the author of these words, which had so blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 a nebulous memory, as if from a previous life, the owl was a symbol of code, and the goddess code, outside under the moon, or perhaps on the city walls when the wind rose. But there was no time to contemplate this further now, for the automatons had seen her, and their mechanical arms extended toward the blah, the fragment, and ran as their beams converged on blah. So this little text already showed you that the design teams were reading Greek myths to understand how they can incorporate those myths into the design of this program. The second thing is, if you're really nerdy like myself, those little codes that you see right there can actually be translated. There's actually decoders, and there are people who are so obsessed with this game that they create decoders to see exactly what the codes are. So they're actually logical codes. You just have to translate to English. So next part, please. Okay. So I'll read a little bit more, not the whole thing. You must consider these riddles, the Sphinx said, and tell me the riddle that I did not reveal. The Sphinx smiled, the gears in her jaw creaking, her teeth a nightmare of rust, her left eye flickered, but none of its terror was diminished. The ruins were silent in the air. I think, she finally said, that the riddle you did not reveal is this. Why do these riddles exist in the first place? Why do these curious automatons, these mute children of Hephaestus, behave as they do, forcing me to devise these intricate solutions? Each is a riddle, but the greater riddle is their purpose. The Sphinx did not answer. Her eye was lifeless now. Athena removed it from its socket, knowing that its power would aid her, yet feeling also a deep sorrow at the passing of this fearful creature. So the idea is that the riddles is what give purpose to the automaton, which is very interesting parallel to what's happening in the game. Please go next. Okay, so Kay, can you help me take over this part? This is a very important section.
Okay. Though Scranton himself never used the term, his remark about the inescapable materiality of life, like that of the bronze giant Talos, even the most faithful philosopher cannot live without his blood, ultimately became known as the Talos Principle. What seemingly enraged many of his contemporaries and a significant number of later thinkers is the principle's simplicity and unassailability, which, according to a fragment found in Miletus, cut through their rhetorical webs which sought to tangle the listener with fanciful words and thoughts of the heavens, like Alexander's sword through a Gordian knot. Diogenes, and I'm going to go Rhetoric, makes mention of a dialogue by an examinander of Chalcedon that expanded greatly on the Talos Principle, but that work remains lost.
Thank you. I know, that's like a big mouthful. So,
It's okay. I'll practice next time.
And it doesn't matter. So this here, what exactly is the Talos Principle? Essentially, it just speaks to the materiality of life, that life is grounded in material, and that's why we decompose, that's why we decay, and this is why we die. So if we can get away from the materiality of life, that's one way that you can extend life. That's actually what the lesson they got from this is. So please go next. Okay. So Cicero, without reading this whole block, let's talk a little bit on this first part. I'll just read a little bit on the first part, okay? Shall the industrious husbandman then plant trees, the fruit of which he shall never see, and shall not the great men found laws, institution in a republic? What does the procreation of children imply in our care to continue our names and our adoptions and our scrupulous exactness in drawing up wills and the inscriptions and monuments and panegyrics and our thoughts run on futurity? This is Cicero's discussion on what exactly is immortality and the need for immortality and the reason why we have children. So please go next. Okay. So, oops, just go. Oh, okay. So the next part, maybe I'll ask Chris to help us because there's a lot of reading, but the next part is the Egyptian myth that inspired the game. So Chris, can you please take over?
Sure. Book of Osiris, Humans Ka and Bo. The Book of the Scribe of Osiris, sometimes also referred to as the Book of the Journey to Aro, is an ancient Egyptian text discovered in the excavation of Oxyrhynchus. It has caused a certain degree of controversy among Egyptologists, as some argue that it was a classic funerary text, such as the Book of Coming Forth by Day, while others believe it to be a poetic work not intended to be understood literally. The book tells the story of a dying man who asks a scribe about the afterlife. The scribe, a servant of Osiris, describes how the man's Ka, life force, will become separated from his Ba, personality, and that he will have to reunite the two and become an Ankh, living intellect, passing a series of trials in the Duat underworld in order to reach the paradise of Aru. Unlike similar texts, the Book of the Scribe of Osiris focuses less on giving advice or blank. A recent study suggests that the text may have been intended as a philosophical commentary on the world of the living through the allegory of the Duat. It remains unclear whether this was the intent of the original pre-Alexandrian author or a...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That particular one was talking about the different elements, even the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Chinese, the ancient texts have been thinking about what exactly composes a human being. And we divide those elements into parts. And that will come into play when I discuss the philosophy later on. So here's another design issue. Okay. So as they're designing, all of a sudden they start thinking about some problems. And one of the problems they discovered was, what exactly is an AI? Okay. So please go next. Okay. So I'll read a bit here. So it says right here in a quote there, we keep discussing what an artificial intelligence would mean to us and how it would change our understanding of the world. That's a great topic, and I think we've covered it extensively. What we've barely mentioned, though, is the other side of the coin. I mean, our lives would still be what they were before, AI or no AI. The question I think we should discuss, even if it's all completely hypothetical, is the perspective of the artificial intelligence itself. What would it be like to be that creature, to suddenly come into being, created by others as an experiment, to have all the information about yourself, to know exactly how you function? What would you think about the world? Would you see meaning, beauty? How would you judge humanity? Where would you see yourself fitting into the grand scheme of things? I think we should try to put ourselves into the shoes of such a being. And somebody responded, "Dear Alexandra, thank you for your feedback, but this is a philosophy course, not science fiction." And that's why I almost gave up on my studies. Now, I do have to respond that this is not exactly a fair depiction of philosophy. Yes. Philosophy, we pretty much ask any question. Any question is not knocked out. Perhaps that the student was trying to discuss something that's off topic from originally what the philosophy class was talking about. But certainly, I teach philosophy and we talk about artificial intelligence all the time in my classes. So this is one of the questions we actually address. So please go next. And Kay, do you want to give this a shot? It's a two-parter.
Okay, let me give it a try. Once a true artificial intelligence has been created, the issue of citizenship is going to come up. If we acknowledge that AI has all the abilities of a human brain, should it not be considered a citizen? Is it not, in the legal sense of the word, a person and thus a potential citizen? But where do you draw the line? Some people will object. Will the great apes become citizens? Elephants, whales? The more intelligent parrot species? It's crazy, they will say. I would remind these people that we live in a society in which a corporation, as abstract an entity as one could imagine, is considered a person. So it's not like there's no precedence for a non-human being I'm going to go to be a person. At least artificial intelligence is an actual thinking being, not just a business arrangement. But perhaps we do need to question the definition of personhood. Increasing amounts of evidence regarding the intelligence of elephants or the existence of a culture among whales, for example, could be a sign that we need to answer some. Now, wait for the next slide. Need to, and it said we're going to where and some difficult question. Who better to debate these questions with than the young genius who revolutionized the, and then there's a bit of garble, starting with the letter F, so that might be, and then if there's another screen, let's see.
So no,
Okay,
that's it. That's it. So it had to be cut in two parts because we couldn't scroll that much farther.
Okay.
But that little slide there, what I was trying to show was that part of posthumanism and also transhumanism, posthumanism and transhumanism, is the idea that our definition of a human being changes based on, should be based on current scientific and technological knowledge and discovery. So what they were talking about is actually in reference to those philosophy, which is the idea that what we discovered about human being is this: corporations are now defined as people, so objects can actually be defined as persons. And also we discover from the animal world what those animals are doing and whether or not animals are consciousness and so forth. Therefore, these definitions influence the way we understand people. And also this will help us understand whether or not we should grant citizenship to artificial intelligence. That's what that conversation was about. So, okay, the big spoilers. So there's no more long text to read, but I'm going to give you some spoilers now, okay? So if we can please go next. All right, so I'm sorry, big spoilers here. The purpose of solving the puzzles. So there's several purposes. So first of all, Elohim is a program created by the Institute of Applied Noematics to generate and run AIs and to test the AI's ability to become sentient and develop free will. That's the whole entire purpose, to see if any of the AI can become sentient and have free will. Now, sentience, which is the capacity to feel, involves becoming able to sense the world and have subjective experiences. So subjectivity in philosophy is not this idea of is subjective as you versus myself. That's not what subjectivity means in philosophy. It means the human, the common human experience on the subjective level, which is the interpersonal subjective level. Free will involves making choices while being able to resist external temptations, because you cannot claim that you have free will unless you have the ability to resist those temptations that's thrown at you. Then also, the AIs are to solve the puzzle to obtain sigils, which is, and there's one particular one, which I'm really giving it away. There's one particular sigil you have to get. Everything else you can ignore, but the gray sigil is the one that will allow you to access the 6th floor of the tower. That's the top of the tower that you have to get to, okay? So next. Okay, so now, you are supposed to develop the free will to actually resist Elohim, okay? So Elohim, although Elohim has explicitly warned the AIs to not ascend the tower, the AI is supposed to not feel compelled by Elohim's commands or the serpent's sway. So when they're talking to you, you are not supposed to listen to them. So when Elohim says, go forth, children, and go play with the puzzles, you actually didn't have to go play the puzzle. You can actually go, no, man, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to go find the great sigil. But, you know, for the sake of play, I'm going to go after all the puzzles, right? And ascend the tower with its own free will. Many AIs have failed to reach the top of the tower, and each time an AI fails to do so, Elohim will reboot the AI. This is why we kept seeing, you know, in the messages, something, 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 and then version 1.6. Those are the version of that AI, which may have been replicated over millions of times because it cannot obtain free will. It keeps on following what Elohim asked it to do, or the serpent, okay? And the AI that can reach the top of the tower on its own would be finally uploaded to a physical Android body. So understand that AI, when we're talking about AI in the software sense, right? It doesn't have a physical body, but in the game, it's represented as if it has a physical body. But the one AI that actually achieve free will, achieve human intelligence level, would actually be uploaded, its consciousness be uploaded to Android body and be able to explore the physical world. Please go next. Okay. Now here's the big kicker. So that AI is supposed to continue life as a post-human. So what are we talking about here? The ending of the game reveals that all human beings, as we know, have actually been all wiped out. So every single human being, at the end of the game, this is what you find out. Every single human being had died. That's because global warming caused the permafrost to melt, okay? And when the permafrost melted, it released a whole bunch of viruses that we cannot fight, deadly diseases spread throughout Earth, and we all died. This is according to the story. And you know what's really scary? This is very, very possible scenario. This is currently in conversation right now due to global warming.
I know from our science professors there is discussion of that, especially our friends who are microbiologists.
Yes, you can tell them this game is onto it. And it's made in 2014, so this stuff is not new. This stuff has been circulating. Everyone's quite afraid. Prior to human death, okay, the Institute of Applied Noematics stored all human knowledge in the program Elohim. So just knowledge, all the collection of knowledge, in hope that the program will one day generate an AI equipped with all human knowledge, can develop the free will to continue existence as a post-human. So here's the question, and this is something that I put here, which is immortality in this sense is granted to collective human knowledge, not consciousness. So in the game, it says that Elohim is a program that maintained and contained all human knowledge, but it never did clarify, at least in my play, whether or not it's actually human consciousness. So it's actually just human knowledge. It's as if we're saying that Google collected all the human knowledge based on our human responses and used that to upload to an Android. So is that actually immortality? I don't know about that. But in the game, that's what they think immortality is. Now, in the post-humanist perception, also transhumanist, this was never supposed to be in discussion. What they think immortality is to maintain the individual consciousness so that I myself know I'm Sherry and I can continue on by uploading myself to an Android. But in this game, it's not so. All human beings died. So the question is this really actually immortality to upload Google or Alexa, the knowledge of Alexa, and put it into a being and say, go forth, you created free will. At this point, it's hard to say that as a post-human. It might just very well be its own species. It's hard to say. So if we can go next. Okay, so I'm going to try my very, very best to run through really, really complex philosophical theory. Actually, they're basics in philosophy, but it still takes a long time to explain them. I'm going to run through them as fast as possible.
Okay.
Yep. Please go next. So I'm going to talk about determinism because I think determinism is very relevant to the discussion of the Talos Principle. So determinism is a philosophy that believes that all events in the universe have cause and effect relationship. So everything are related, all events occurs due to cause and effect. And the occurrences of events are determined by causality. Now, determinism is a big umbrella and many theories have been derived from that. So it's not just one type. There's actually many, many types. The most extreme version of determinism is hard determinism, which renders free will and ethics absolutely impossible. We want to discuss that in a bit. The mind-body distinction also poses a problem for determinism. So mind-body distinction is a philosophical problem since the beginning of philosophy, which is if the mind and the body are separate things. So here's the mind, whatever that is, and the body is separate. How do they speak to each other? Can the mind directly affect the body? Can the body affect the mind? Or are they separate and have independent free will? What are they? So let's discuss some of the theory to understand how Talos Principle really exemplifies determinism and free will. So please go next. Okay, so I have two slides to discuss it, but first of all, hard determinism is also known as scientific determinism. So this is the idea that both physical and mental events, so mental events means our thoughts, okay? Physical means I'm moving my arm, okay? All have a cause. So the causal universe caused me to have physical and mental events. So all choices we make then are determined by cause and are not of free will. Okay, some choices are epiphenomena. So epiphenomena means that those are just side effects of thoughts that don't really have any influence on any events whatsoever. Okay, so in this worldview, free will and chance are not possible. You cannot have free will if everything is determined by cause. And in fact, this is actually the current the view of the scientific community. They would have us to argue that there is no free will. And this is a hot topic right now in sciences. Okay, the next type is soft determinism, which is also known as compatibilism. So compatibilism admits and accepts that physical events have a cause. So they say, yes, all physical events are causally related, but mental events do not. So they deny this idea that there are causal relationship between the physical and the mental world, or that there's some kind of cause beyond mental worlds. So mental events, which are decisions, so every time you make a decision is a mental event, pose no effects on the physical world. So free will to make mental choices is possible. But what they're basically saying is that if I think I want something to happen, it doesn't really influence the events as outside of me. But I'm free. I have free will in the sense that I am free to think of choices. So that's what the soft determinists think. Now, the third type is predeterminism. So predeterminism is a latch-on using God and add on to hard determinism. So the idea is that God is the primum mobile, so which is the name for first mover or the original mover of a hard deterministic universe. So if everything is based on cause and effect, the later on the predeterminist says, okay, I'll give you this. I'll give you that the whole world is based on cause and effect, but that God sits in the primary position, that he moves, so everything moves. So the whole universe is determined by God. But in this particular formula, free will, miracles, and chance are all not possible. Chance is something that happens accidentally, right? There is no impossibility. There is no chance here when everything is already predetermined. So next. Okay, so next type, indeterminism, is a defiance toward determinism. It's a rejection of determinism, okay? It denies particularly that all events are determined by causality. It doesn't reject that the universe could be causal, and it doesn't reject that some events are causal, but it rejects the notion that every single event is based on causality. And it accepts that chaos can occur, Now, Einstein famously had problems with this. Einstein actually believed in a God, but he believed in a Spinozian God, okay? And I'm not going to go too deep into the problem with Einstein, but Einstein could not accept quantum physics. Quantum physics had a lot to do with things or events that seemingly had no connection to the physical world, okay? They are chance related and it's chaotic. So for Einstein, he does not accept quantum physics. He does not believe it's a real physics because he says, wait a second, the whole world can be predicted by causality. All event could be predicted by causality. So I reject your physics that there are certain things such as quantum mechanics that can occur that doesn't have any effects or is not affected by the physical world. So Einstein is one of the famous hard determinists. I had an issue with such thing like indeterminism. Next one is fatalism. So fatalism does not mean fatalistic in the common parlance of what that means. So fatalism has to do with the word fate, okay? So it's the notion that some events are determined prior to causal chain in motion. So that means before cause and effect takes place, there are certain events that are destined, whoever destined them, to occur no matter what happens. So no matter what cause or what chance happens, those events will definitely happen. So for example, if there's going to be a car crash down on the street, in the middle of the street, and that's predestined, right? That's fated to happen. No matter what you do, that event will happen. But free will is possible in the sense that you can decide to sleep at home and not go out to actually be part of that car crash. You might not be conscious that you made a decision to avoid the car crash, but again, you have the will, you have the ability to choose to not be part of that fatalistic car crash. Okay, that's fatalism. And then free will is not exactly a nice word in philosophy. It's not in the sense that, oh, freedom, infinite freedom. That's not a good thing in philosophy. It's the idea that some of our choices are free from cause, but can still produce effects. So even though our decisions are not based on cause, some of our decision can lead to consequences for other things. And this is really problematic because there's no way for us to trace the root of our behavior, the root of why we do something. And there's no root, it's very hard to discuss responsibility. Who is responsible for our behavior? That's a problem. This is a bad word. So next. Okay, so hard determinism, going back to hard determinism and why it's not possible for ethics, right? Morality is not possible under this equation because first, free will is required to make moral and immoral decisions, okay, moral choices. So I have to be able to decide I'm going to do something knowing that it's moral or not moral, okay? In this hard deterministic universe, all events, whether mental or physical, is already caused by something else. And there's no chance that can occur. So therefore, since free will is not possible, morality is not possible. So we can't even speak of morality if we take the hard determinist viewpoint. Ethics is also not possible, okay? Because ethics is a set of rules that we create to govern a group of people's behavior, right? But if our behavior is determined by causality, that means we have no control, no responsibility over our behavior. Therefore, we can't even institute a set of rules for people to follow because we're just going to say, well, it's already caused. I can't do anything about it. So ethics and morality are not possible in this equation. Next. Okay, so mind-body distinction and the soul. So I'm going back to that a little bit, right? So mind-body distinction, the philosophical problem that questions whether the mind can influence the body and vice versa, because we think of them as separate things in philosophy at the beginning of philosophy, okay? Now, the body can be compelled by external events to act. So we could, someone can poke you and your arm will lift up because someone compelled you to do it. The mind can be compelled to think in a certain way based on wants and desires. So I might say, well, someone told me, for example, that I shouldn't be eating after 8 o'clock, but I have a desire to eat. So my own internal desire is compelling me, right, to go eat. Now, if we can be compelled, this is a philosophical question, if we can be compelled or coerced by internal and external forces to act, such as desires, environmental forces, and genetics, so we're born with certain genetics, how can we actually have free will based on all those factors that's influencing us? So ancient philosophers, not all the philosophers now, but ancient philosophers suggest that a soul, this thing that is part of your mind and body, but also free from your mind and body. So soul is like a little operator, like a pilot that pilots your mind and body. So because it's not inside of your mind and body, but it's piloting it, it's free from causal forces. And therefore, this is their answer to, okay, you have free will because you have a soul. So the soul allows you to make free decisions, to make decisions that resist, okay? Now, soul in a modern sense, in today's sense, is called consciousness. So if you hear consciousness and so forth, that kind of derive out of soul because no one really want to talk about soul seriously in the sense of philosophical sense, okay? So next. Okay, now I only have 2 little screenshots, okay, from the game to show you how the game correlates it back to the philosophy I was trying to talk about. So one is they borrow some religious context regarding hell. So this is a note about hell. It says, mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matters where, if I be still the same, and what I should be, all but less than he whom thunder hath made greater. Here at least we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure, and in my choice, to reign is worth ambition. Though in hell, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. So the suggestion is that the mind is actually free in hell because the mind is able to roam and be free of the Almighty. So next. Okay, now this is actually called the heaven text, but anyway, and when you open the file, it's called the heaven text, but it says, from William Blake, this is a poem. The ancient tradition that the world will be consumed in fire at the end of 6,000 years is true, as I've heard from hell. For the cherub with his flaming sword is hereby commanded to leave his guard at tree of life, and when he does, the whole creation will be consumed and appear infinite and holy, whereas now it appears finite and corrupt. This will come to pass by an improvement of sensual enjoyment. But first, the notion that man has a body distinct from his soul is to be expunged. This I shall do by printing in the infernal method by corrosives, which in hell are salutary and medicinal, melting apparent surfaces away and displaying the infinite which was hid. So William Blake in this poem is actually rejecting this mind-body distinction, which soul, if you want to say soul or mind, you can replace those words there. And basically what he is saying that he wants hell to corrupt the mind. He wants to corrupt this distinction. So hell is better in both stories about heaven and hell in this particular narrative. So please go next. Okay, so I'm leaving our panel can discuss or not discuss. These are provocative questions here, okay? So this is a question about the AI. So let's consider for a second the ending of the Talos Principle, which I kind of went over earlier. How would a compatibilist, which is also known as a soft determinist, right? And I'll remind everybody, okay? A soft determinist believes that the physical world is bound by causality, but the mind, the mental events are not. Okay, versus an indeterminist, which is just denying, like determinism is not really true. Some thoughts are really causal based, some are not, right? That's a determinist. Interpret whether or not the AI has achieved true free will. So that's one question. And I know that because Chris and Kay might not have played the game, so it's kind of hard to answer that given they have limited information really about the conclusion. The other question that I left for everybody to think about is for the AI to be able to resist coercion from Elohim and temptation from the serpent, it needs to develop free will because you need free will to resist. Okay. Did the AI ever develop consciousness to develop free will? Because you need to have consciousness, right? A self-awareness in the sense of I have a soul that's separate from my mind and body, right? To develop free will. So what exactly is the AI conscious? So is the AI conscious? And also we kind of need to grab evidence from the game to see indeed if the AI actually achieved consciousness in order for us to say it has free will. Because the game at the end is going to suggest, well, you've been uploaded to an Android body. You must be conscious. You must have free will. I have questions about that. And that for me, that's the last slide, guys.
Okay, then I have questions for you because you're right. I did not play this, so I feel like I wouldn't be answering this how I would if I had played it. But here's my question for you: if you were giving this to assignments for students to do,
yeah,
at what point would you give them these questions that you have here at the end? Would you do it after they had played the whole game, or because I don't feel right giving these questions at the beginning of the game because because knowing about the AI is something you don't want to let your students know about right away.
Right.
So would you have them play it for a certain number of hours and then give it to them, or just at the very end? What do you think?
Right. That's a really good question, by the way, Kay. Here's how I do it. This game took me more than 50 hours to play. And I know our students are just like us. They're extremely busy. So the way I design games or assignments with games is never just at the beginning or at the end, like some teachers think about. So I try to do this, pre-assignment, middle assignment, later assignment. So basically stretches out over a month. So there's certain questions that we use to lead the students to think about when they're playing the game. They're going, okay, that's interesting. But I don't want to give the ending away because that'd be horrible.
Yeah.
These questions are given at the very end. So they usually have 3 papers or 3 little assignments associated with this to really answer the question for me. And I usually have more questions than this. So I just put 2 here, but I usually have them, give them like 10 of them and they choose from one of the 10 to really try to answer that question.
Okay, because I was curious about that, and it's also making me think about if I assigned this, what exactly questions would I be asking? And Chris, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, not really.
Okay, I know you teach accounting and business, and this might be a stretch, but for me, if you started to have discussions about AI, I also love the fact that you see behind the curtain when it comes to the game design.
Right.
And that reminds me of the book that we read before in the book club, and it has a really, it has a title that sounds like anything else, but the title is You. But when we read that book about how games are being designed, once you started after the first couple slides, I really thought about how this does give it a peek behind it, and you could really have a discussion about how a student would go about designing their own games
Mm-hmm. Right.
based on this. I like that. I like that part of that becomes, talking about the design becomes explicit in the game.
Right. Certainly, this game is extremely complicated, and I question if I did justice to this game, because I honestly, out of the 50 plus hours of gameplay, I probably grabbed screenshots from the first 12 hours. 12 hours of gameplay. There's so much content, so much story, so much metadiegetic narratives that I'm not covering in here. So yeah, particularly with this particular game, I am more interested, because for philosophy classes, I want students to think deeply, because we don't I'm trying to encourage as much critical thinking as possible, because students, what they tend to do is to play the game and only think about whether it's fun or not, or it's just a hypothetical, who cares. But what I tell them is what philosophers do. We always throw out thought experiments. The purpose of a thought experiment is to give you pause and force you to answer questions on the spot and say, okay, I'm going to take this seriously. And if this actually occurs, how would I go about addressing that? This is actually what the technology industry, the tech industry, is trying to hire philosophers for. We're able to create thought experiments that incorporate their issues and their concerns to test out some of their concept before they make, for example, a self-driving car. That's actually what's happening right now. So that's what thought experiments are for. So yes, the student can make games. No, they probably can't make it in such a very, very complex way, but they certainly can write a narrative, to test out their concept and see if they actually understood what we talked about.
No, that's cool. This looks like a hell of a complicated game, but it looks so intriguing. I mean, the game mechanics, based on what you were showing us, an average gamer can probably figure out the game mechanics, but that's not talking about the puzzles. And the puzzles sound intriguing, and the addition of the narrative makes this seem like a game that would be worth playing and really having discussions with students about.
Right. This game won the Game of the Year in 2014, and I can't remember the entity that gave it, but it won so many awards when it came out.
Yeah. I can see why.
Okay.
So, do we have anything else before we wrap up our monthly ethics and games? No, if we don't, Sherry, thank you so much. This was phenomenal detail. and I will go and I will index this, okay?
Thank you.
So people can pick and choose what portions they want to watch first. But thank you. It's gonna make me play this. I'm
awesome.
So thank you for taking 50 hours of worth of my time. Okay, then we're gonna say goodbye and good evening to everybody. So see you all next month.